And now I would like to introduce to you Veronica Oakler, Clean Water for North Carolina's new Executive Director. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure to meet her yet, she formerly lived and worked in Florida, where she practiced law and policy for 10 years, concentrating on environmental, land use, and real estate issues. She's written laws requiring pollution notification in the oil and gas sector, as well as comprehensive spring watershed safeguards. She's helped government agencies meet their legal and regulatory environmental duties and previously analyzed and conducted outreach regarding disparate air toxicity impacts. Through her expertise on these matters, she's contributing to our environmental justice law and policy work, as well as our water justice and polluter accountability programs. She's already proven herself to be a caring and fair-minded leader devoted to the mission of this organization to promote clean, safe water and environments and empower just communities for all North Carolinians. Please give a nice Zoom wave for Veronica Oakler.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to see all of you here. It's really exciting to have so many wonderful faces. I know we could only have so many people on our meeting today, so we will be recording this for later for those of your friends who would have liked to join and couldn't. So thank you so much for coming. To get us started, I wanted to hear from you a little bit about, in a few words, how would you describe environmental justice? Feel free to answer in the chat box. Just trying to get an understanding on what you think environmental justice is, what matters to you, and it'll probably help me a little bit to know just how detailed to get in this introduction to everyone. So don't be shy, feel free to type in the chat and I'll pause just a moment so you have some quiet time to think and write. All right, I'm seeing some coming in now. I see do no harm to our environment. EJ means clean, safe, healthy environments to live and work for all. Access to clean water and air, as well as safe and nutritious food for all communities. And these are all some really great examples. So feel free to keep typing some in as we go. But I just wanted to give y'all a quick definition to get us started and lay a foundation. So what is environmental justice? Well, according to the EPA, environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. And this is with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So really, we all deal with pollution to varying degrees, but there are some disproportionate impacts. And that is where we're seeing environmental justice coming in. So now I want to look at Title VI. Title VI is an aspect or a tool that we use in environmental justice. It is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so in particular, I'd like to hear from you. How familiar are you with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act? If you can type in 1 if you're not familiar, 5 if you're super familiar, anywhere in between, just to kind of give me an idea of where you are. So I'm seeing 1s and 5s. I expected to see a lot more 2s through 4s. So I'm glad to see we have quite a bit of a range here for y'all today. So I will give y'all just a little bit of a background of what Title VI is of the Civil Rights Act to help you understand a little bit more about what Naeema and Belinda will be talking about today. So let's see, what is Title VI? Title VI specifies that no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. That's a bit of a mouthful. So what does that really mean? Well, in other words, Title VI prohibits discrimination from recipients of federal financial assistance, and it doesn't allow them to discriminate based on race, color, or national origin. So federal financial assistance means that it's a federal government agency or a state agency that receives federal funds, such as when they've been delegated a federal duty. So I wanted to make a quick note, though, about national origin. For national origin, the discrimination there specifically includes place of birth, ethnicity or ancestry, culture related to national origin, and ability to speak English. These are all aspects of one's national origin that may or may not be impacted in the environmental justice and Title VI realm. So I want to talk to you a little bit about discrimination, but I'd love to hear from you. What is discrimination? Here's another poll and a chance for you to type into the chat. I want to hear from you. What is discrimination? So provide an example in the chat box of what discrimination means to you, or an example of some type of discrimination that you have experienced or seen. So one example is saying you are denied program services, aids, or benefits, or you're given bigger burdens than others purely because of your race, your color, or your national origin. I'm curious if you have any experience that you'd like to share that I can read out to the group, just as an example. I'm seeing here one person saying landfills located in communities of color and lower income. So yes, that's actually a really good example and something I want to touch on, where Title VI does not look at rural areas or low income as an aspect of protection. This is where environmental justice is trying to fill that gap. Environmental justice is looking at low income and rural areas in addition to protecting race, color, and national origin. So I'm seeing here too, non-English speakers being denied access to critical health information because the information is only provided in English. There are also some really great examples of discrimination. So next, I want to talk to you a little bit about what the two main types of discrimination are, specifically under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Intentional discrimination is the first one, and it focuses on motive and intent. It's where an act or omission is because of the actual or perceived race, color, or national origin. This is discriminatory motive. An example would be the facility can be permitted here because poor and BIPOC, or Black, Indigenous, people of color, and people live here, or because Caucasian people don't live here. That's explicitly the decision why it's being included or not included. Another kind is disparate impacts. This is where motive is irrelevant. And as you can see in this little drawing here, it's looking at the outcomes, the consequences, not motivation. This is where a supposedly neutral policy or practice actually has a disproportionate and adverse effect. So you can see here, the neutral policy would be, well, everyone has to share and carry their burden equally. Everyone has to carry 3 stones. But as you can see in the diagram here, if some of the people are carrying larger stones than others, it becomes imbalanced. And we end up with some portions of our population carrying a much heavier burden, even though we're all neutrally carrying just 3 stones. So when we're looking at what's neutral and what's not, that's where we're having some extra steps we'll have to take that we'll discuss a little bit more after you've heard from Belinda and Naeema on their stories. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what Title VI is versus environmental justice. Title VI focuses on avoiding discrimination based on race, color, and national origin. That's how Title VI works. Environmental justice, or EJ, focuses on justice and equity for all races, national origins, plus rural and low income. So this is something I previously mentioned here, that there are some gaps in Title VI, and these are just some, where EJ is coming in and trying to fill those gaps. So we have to ask, is it just a coincidence that polluting facilities are more often cited and permitted and less often enforced upon in low income, rural, and BIPOC communities? We can't blame the government agent employees who are just doing their job. Something's clearly lacking somewhere. We're thinking it's in the law and a little bit of NIMBY. What's NIMBY? It's not in my backyard. Essentially, it's not about forcing these polluting industries onto affluent, suburbanized, or Caucasian communities. It's about those with the power to be heard saying, NIMBY, not in my backyard. And the consequence is that this burden then falls on the shoulders of those without that power. So don't take my word for it. Let's listen to our speakers to share their stories, and then you can decide. Thank you. I'll switch it over now to Amanda to introduce our speakers, and hopefully they'll have some great stories that you will learn from and take with you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Veronica, for the great introduction. Certainly a lot to cover in a short presentation, so glad you broke that down a bit for us. And now I'd like to introduce our guest speakers for today, Belinda Joyner and Naeema Muhammad. And I bet some of you are already familiar with these two amazing ladies. Belinda grew up in Northampton County and has been involved in numerous local environmental struggles. She's worked for a long time trying to expose the industries who thought they could turn her community into a dumping ground. Well, clearly they didn't know that they'd have to reckon with Belinda. She founded the Concerned Citizens of Northampton County and has been an effective organizer against many threats, including a liquid fertilizer plant, hazardous waste incinerator, private prison, and the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Belinda has been working with Clean Water for North Carolina for the past 20 plus years as our Eastern organizer. Naeema is no less a force for the communities that she works with. In 1981, she was a founding member of the Black Workers for Justice, a community-based organization that addresses workers' rights in North Carolina. Since 2001, she's served as a community organizer for the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, where they are leading statewide efforts and supporting grassroots movements for the environmental and social justice movements. Since 2014, she has served as the organizing co-director of the NCEJ network. Some of you might already be familiar with her work as a community organizer, working with folks living next to industrial hog operations. On behalf of these neighbors who suffered from the unjust waste management practice of the Lagoon and Sprayfield system, she's played a key role in a Title VI case between impacted community members and Smithfield Foods. You'll be learning more about this and other issues today as we listen to Belinda and Naeema, two friends fighting for justice for overburdened communities in North Carolina. We hope to learn a bit about how the Civil Rights Act and environmental justice policies can be used to protect communities, as well as where they have fallen short and must be strengthened to amplify the voices of the people who are most impacted by polluting industries. Welcome, Belinda and Naeema. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us. I'm glad to be with you.
I would just like to say hello to everybody. And I looked at the chat and I saw so many familiar names. And I just thank you all for tuning in and that support that you are showing to us today. It means a great deal because this is where we got where we are. I am Belinda Joyner and I live in Garrisburg, North Carolina, in Northampton County, and I refer to it as a dumping ground. We had a commissioner who has passed on. His name was James Boone, and he was a true commissioner. And he told me years ago that being that we're right off the corridor of I-95, that everything that they wanted to put in, that, you know, this is where it would be. Now, the eastern end of the county is a lot of farmland, but when you start, I'd say from Garrisburg to Gaston, that's where it stopped, because if you go further up 46, you have Lake Gaston, and we know that, you know, they're not going to put anything up on Lake Gaston. I remember years ago, a gentleman wanted to put a car wash up there just to subsidize his income. And because it was Lake Gaston, he wasn't allowed to do that. But my first question, I just want to give a little food for thought that, you know, maybe some of you have not been. How familiar are you with your local elected officials? Just how familiar are you with those people that make those decisions as to what's in your community, what comes in your community? How familiar are you with them? and I'll tell you why I asked that question a little bit later. But getting back to Northampton County, I live 5 minutes from I-95. We have an Enviva plant. We have a Smithfield hog farm. We would have been home to the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. We have a Lowe's distribution center, and I do have to give credit where credit is due. It's about 2 miles or so back off the highway. It's not bothering anybody. We have a lot of people that's in this community that do have jobs. It's a distribution center, so they send stuff out to the Lowe's stores, and they're doing what I would think, is not harming the community. They're not putting out any pollution, but we have, like I say, quite a few community people that work at Lowe's. So I can appreciate that. With the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, it was a fight. And a lot of people on this call were part of that fight for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And I take my hat off to many of them because they've been here and they know, they've been to Northampton County. They've worked with us. They've seen what's going on here. And without people coming together to fight, we wouldn't be where we are. And I have to go back a minute to some 20-some years ago. I had a cousin, and we used to have a truck stop right off I-95, and he just happened to be in there one night and heard some people over talking, and they didn't pay him any mind because he just didn't look like anybody that was important. But little did they know he was one of the smartest men that lived in Northampton County. His name was Charlie Garner. They were talking about Thermochem, which was a chemical plant, and they were planning to build this plant right here in Gettysburg. And being that he was there and overheard what was said, the next day he came out in the community because he's well known, and he started talking to the community members, and we started organizing, and we got a petition, and that's how we don't have Thermochem here. They wanted to put Wackenhut Prison here. Again, we fought that. Right in my backyard a few years back, they wanted to put a liquid fertilizer plant there. We had to fight that off, and I'm saying literally in my backyard. But I have to credit the Environmental Justice Summit Network for a lot of what I know. I've heard a lot of things, but when Hurricane Floyd came, Princeville was washed out, and a lot of the community churches and people, we were taking donations down to the Brick, where we have the Environmental Justice Summit. And I met this lady named Judy, and she asked me, did I know about the Environmental Justice Summit? And I said, no, I've never heard of it. So she invited us there. And it's been 21, 22 years, and I've only missed 2 meetings because that's where I really, really learned how to fight injustices, because we had people from all over the world. We had a connection. I had Naeema, I had Gary Grant, I had Steve Wing. These people did not mind fighting. They did not mind showing you or teaching you something that you didn't know. If you needed something, it was made available to you. And I will never forget Therese Vick. She's originally from Northampton County, and I was in one of her sessions, and we were talking, and she said, you have a right to know. And I'm like, you have a right to know? And she said, anytime you go to a county meeting or a commissioner's meeting and you ask them something and they don't tell you, you can file a lawsuit because you have a right to know. Well, at that time, we were fighting a landfill right down off I-95, Capstone Paper Company. And when we went, it was a bunch of us there. At one time, we were really strong in Northampton County. When we showed up in numbers. I mean, we packed the house. We even got it where our commissioners were meeting during the day. We even got it where we would have one meeting at night because people work during the day. If you work during the day, you can't attend the meeting. So a lot of stuff went on that shouldn't have gone on. So we fought to get that night meeting. And when we showed up, and they was like, all of you are here. What you doing here? And I looked at them and I said, you do know we have a right to know. And right then, everything just flipped. Can you meet with us after the meeting? So I attribute a lot of my strength to the environmental justice and being with Naeema. People that's not afraid to speak up and to speak out. It's just been a true blessing. And the connections that I've made down through the years have made it even more exciting. So with Northampton County, I say a dumping ground because the Atlantic Coast Pipeline was really scheduled to go through Raleigh, NIMBY, not in my backyard. When they looked at the demographics and the golf courses and this, that, and the other, oh no, we can't have this here in our community. That would degrade our community. So we had a economic developer named Gary Brown, and he talked with them, and they just, they souped them up. You know, we're going to give the county this amount of money. We're going to give the Board of Education $2 million, on and on. And we would have also been home to the compressor station, which is, like I say, right in our community again. So we were in what we call a high consequence or blast zone, which didn't matter to them. And Hope Taylor, Erica, myself, and William Barber III, we walked that community twice, going door to door, giving out information about being in a blast zone and the pipeline. And a lot of people were not familiar because they could look right out of their yards and see the pipes right in their backyards, you know, these big blue pipes. And one man, when we talked to him, he was under the impression that, you know, I can, you know, tap on and I can get some natural gas. And I'm like, no, sir, that's not for you. If you have a big company like Lowe's, or if you live down on the coast in Virginia, now they had two types of gas. They had the gas that they were going to run through here and kill us dead, and not to say that it wouldn't kill the people in Virginia, but it had a different fragrance wherein they could tap on and use it in their home as natural gas. But here I'm looking at it right in these people's backyard, and they couldn't do that. So when he really found out that he couldn't do it, he was really furious, and you know, he had some charged words to say. And but you know, without education, without knowing, this is why a lot of things happen. And that's why I asked that question earlier. How familiar are you with your local officials? Because the first time that I went to a economic development meeting, and this meeting has been going on for years, and a friend of ours, we went, and they were so amazed that, oh, you all are here. We've never had anybody from the public to come. And I'm saying, okay, this is where all of this come in at. You know, the economic developer would go out and supposedly bring economic development, good jobs that's not harmful, going to pay you a lot of money, which is just a lot of hogwash. But anyway, that's their job. And we was paying him $90,000 a year. So he went out and this is what he did. Then we had Vista Green, a company that bought 825 acres of land right down in Seaboard. Again, some farmland, but then people that look like me lived there. Well, some of the adjacent property owners, the letter went out prematurely, and that's how we found out about it. They wanted to put a recycling coal ash plant there. So when we went before our Board of Commissioners to confront them about this letter, now we sitting in the commissioners meeting, we had 3 people there that had letters that they had received in the mail. When our NAACP president, Tony Burnett, confronted the commissioners about this letter, at the end of the meeting, you know, they have their say, and oh, they just were so ugly to him. You just coming in here, you lying, you just causing confusion. That's not true. And I think it shocked him so bad that he couldn't respond right at that moment. And I'm saying to myself, Tony, you got the letter, show it to him. You know, this is, but I couldn't holler it out in the meeting. So when we came out of the meeting, I'm like, Tony, you had the letter right there. You didn't write it. They did. Why didn't you show it to him? And he said, but I'm just so shocked at the treatment, the way that they disrespected me, saying, you know, that I'm causing trouble, I'm lying. Well, guess what? We found out that they knew about it 6 months before we did. So we knew that they were not there for us. So what we did when election time came, we voted every one of them out. And now we have a whole new set of commissioners. And that's why I asked the question, how well do you know your leaders? Because they're the ones that's responsible. We want a call or a public hearing with DEQ about the biomass down in Duplin and Sampson County. And one lady said, how did we get picked? And I'm like, oh my God, I was on pins and needles, but you can't speak until your turn comes. And so I guess 5 or 6 more people spoke before I did. And so when I got to it, and I'm like, I hope this lady is still on the line, ma'am, you just didn't get picked. This is what your economic developer did for you all. He went out and either they contacted him or he contacted them. And that's how it came to be. So I started urging our people to go to our planning board meetings, to our economic development meetings, and to our commissioners meeting. And we started packing the house. And when we got to so much is in Northampton County. When we got to the coal ash recycling plant, this man lived in Bertie County, but he had did an interview with our Daily Herald newspaper, and he said, why not Northampton County? So when we had our public hearing with them, it was so many of us that they had to do it in 3 sessions. So my question to him was, you know, you stated in the paper, why not Northampton County? Why not Bertie County? And he said, oh, do you have a railroad right here, you know, and they can bring it right to the railroad. And I said, well, sir, when you have that type of money to buy 825 acres of land, if you pay CXX, they'll build a railroad right to your door. And then you can put it there because we don't want it. So these are the things that Northampton County has been up against. In Viva, we're still fighting. CNN did an awesome job when they came here in May. They kind of put some stuff out there to make our people come out and really say what's what. I had confronted our former county commissioner chairman years ago about the incentives that they gave in Viva to come here. And of course, you know, I was wrong. I was the bad guy. I'm trying to cause trouble. Well, when CNN came, they talked to who now is our economic developer, or the county economic developer. And he said that when Enviva came here, they gave them too much of incentive to come. We are a tier 1 county, meaning that we are very poor. Our population, the predominantly people look just like me. We are 22% below the poverty level. We are paying, because of Enviva, 6% property tax. Now, we are tier 1. So now we're the 3rd largest county in the state of North Carolina that's paying that kind of tax. So you can see that environmental justice, environmental injustice happens to people that they feel like can't do any better. You know, they don't have anything, so we can just give them anything. They can take it and you know, just be quiet and be glad that you got it. But I thank God for a voice. I thank God for people that came together, that came here, that helped us. And then we got together in June of 2019. Bishop William Barber was here at our community center. We had people from West Virginia, we had people from Virginia, and of course, North Carolina. And at the end of that meeting, we got together and had a meeting. And we formed a tri-county, tri-state strike. And we went to Roanoke, Virginia, right on the grounds of Wells Fargo's bank, because that was one of the banks that was supporting the pipeline. And we had a big strike out there, and it was awesome. I mean, we had people from everywhere. So, you know, I look at John Wagner, Bobby, Lib Huxley, and Hope Tell and Rachel and all of us, you know, like I said, it takes coming together and working together for a cause. Now, the last environmental justice meeting we had in 2019, Mike Sprayberry was there, and he was the county emergency management person, but he's retired recently. And he was in the meeting, and I asked him, I said, Mr. Sprayberry, can I ask you a question? I said, now, you know, we're in a high consequence area of what we call a blast zone. Should we have an explosion, how long would it take a hazmat team to get to Gettysburg? And he looked at me and said, 90 minutes. And I'm like, 90 minutes, that's an hour and a half. So now, if it takes you an hour and a half to get there, what do you think you're gonna find when you arrive? Because we have a volunteer fire department. So just say, for instance, if the fire broke out at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm at home in my bed sleep. I'm a volunteer fireman. I have to get up out of my bed, get dressed, go to the fire station, suit up, and then proceed to wherever the fire might be. So that's how many minutes that I've killed. And then you think another 90 minutes for somebody to get from Raleigh to here. You know, it would be a hazard. All you would find was charred bodies. But at that time, they didn't care. All they was doing was profit over people. And that's the way I look at it, as being profit over people. But thank God, I got an email from Karen last year on the 4th of July. And it said that Atlantic Coastline Pipeline has been canceled. And I'm looking at him like, is this for real? So I read it again. And then I emailed her back and said, you know, is this for real or is this true? And she emailed me, you know, yes, it is. And I just went through my house hollering and jumping and streaming. And so, like I say, I thank God for these groups that have come together to help fight for people of color, poor communities. And when I look at DEQ and DAQ, you know, I can't, I'm just sorry. I've not seen anything that they've done for us. They've been here in my home. They were here last year in February. I took them out to impact the communities. I even took them to this lady's house, 80 years old, and Viva's right in her backyard. Right in her backyard.
Mm-hmm.
She can't sleep at night. She can't come out and work in her flowers. And when we met with Michael Regan last year in February, and we had the hearing in August of 2019 for an expansion, 45 million, and Viva's gonna pay $45 million to expand. And I said to him, I said, we had about 40 some people that was in an opposition of the expansion. So why was the permit granted? And he looked at me and said, as long as they're in compliance with what the law said that they should be, then we have to grant them the permit. So my next question was then, well, why have a public hearing? That's a waste of time. And so then I was told that they would use those comments to strengthen the permitting process. So my next question was, well, when are you all gonna start? Because I've been in meetings with Hope, Michael Regan for years, and nothing has changed. And as I'm looking at it now, still nothing has changed. They have just granted in Viva Title V permit. You got dust, you can see it. People having to power wash their house every 3 months, wash their cars every 2 or 3 days. That's a cost to them. And then people say, oh, Viva's doing this and they're our good friends. But what are they doing for the people that's directly affected, that lives right there? You can give frontline workers a donation. You can contribute it to a food bank. You can give the school $200 or $300. But when little Sally gets asthma from breathing that dust in, are you going to pay her hospital bill? If I get cancer, are you going to pay my hospital bill? So know your local officials. Go to your meetings. And I know now with the pandemic, a lot of things that have gone on that shouldn't gone on because they use that as an excuse for the pandemic and we can't meet in public. So I'm sure that a lot of things have been granted that shouldn't have been granted. But stay focused. The fight is not over. We've only just begun. And I'm claiming Jubilee, and I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Naeema Mohammed.
Okay, thank you, Belinda. And good afternoon, everybody. And same as Belinda, I scrolled through the participants list and saw familiar names and was happy to see Sherry, Will, and Bobby, and Hope, Adrian Wilkie, and Adrian up there with my baby, had my baby with her, one of our new EJ babies, y'all. So I was glad to see her watching as well. Anyway, thank y'all for this program on this afternoon, and I hope you will find it beneficial and helpful. I join in with Belinda in the fight for environmental justice for all of our communities, because we know that everybody deserves clean air and clean water. Those are basic human rights. That's not a privilege, it's a human right to have clean air and clean water. And so we're fighting for that every day as we fight with our communities to protect themselves and to stop all of these dirty corporations from taking over Eastern North Carolina. And we specifically say Eastern North Carolina because if you look on a map and map out where everything is located, it shows that the majority of these dirty industries are in Eastern North Carolina, which is where we have a lot of our tier 1 counties. We have a lot of our um, African American communities, Native American, and Latinx people living in Eastern North Carolina. So we declare that this is not an accident that these things are located here, but we believe that it was intentional because of how these industries perceive people of color to be of no value to them and that our lives are not worth saving. And so we just, whatever we don't want, white people don't want in their backyards, then we'll just put it in Eastern North Carolina. And so we call this environmental racism. And again, we don't think it was a mistake, but intentional because they perceive our communities not to have the economic and political clout to fight them off. We know that as we look at even if we look at the state level, and many of us are aware of what's being done at the state level as we look at watch the news and we see articles that come out from Lisa Sword, who I think is an excellent environmental journalist, and I look forward to following her and listening and reading her articles. And I think that, we see that our legislators is on the side of corporations, and whatever corporations want, that's what they try to deliver to them. And they do it at the expense of the people that voted them in. And so I join in with Belinda when we say that one thing we have got to do as citizens in this state is to begin to really know who our representatives are and how are they representing us. And when we find that they're not representing us, we don't need to hesitate to vote them out of office. And so, y'all, I think all of us are aware that our state house needs a good cleaning. I mean, we need a complete sweep through there because what's up there is just embarrassing to us as a state. All around the world is watching what happens in North Carolina, and it's totally embarrassing. But anyway, so Belinda talked about all of the environmental injustices that they've been faced with in Northampton County, and we've been partners working together now for quite some time. We don't want to give our ages out, so we just gonna say quite some time. We've been working together quite some time, and we find that these injustices that they're battling in Northampton County, we can go to other counties and we're finding some of the same issues. Like the industrial agriculture is not a one county issue; it's a multi county issue in Eastern North Carolina. As a matter of fact, when we look at the history of industrial agriculture in this country, um, the top 10 hog producing counties in the country has been shown to be in Eastern North Carolina, with four of the top 10 being Sampson, Duplin County number one, Sampson County number two, Bladen County, and what was it, Bladen, and I believe Wayne County is on that list as well. But there are the top 10 hog producing counties are in Eastern North Carolina. And the problem with the hogs, I think you all may have heard us talk about this over and over and over. I feel like I done talked about it, till I'm about to turn blue in the face from talking about it. But it's such an injustice to our people in the fact that you got almost 10 million pigs in North Carolina rather, and you only have about 9 million people, so we got more pigs than people. And the pigs are again predominantly Duplin County being number one, has over 2 million pigs, and Sampson County has right at 2 million. So just in those side by side counties, you got about a little over 4 million pigs per person to the to 4 million pigs per person in those two counties alone. And the problem is the way they handle the waste with those animals. They have what they call a lagoon and spray field system. Well, I always tell people I am not talking about that blue lagoon that Brooke Shields was hanging out in. We're talking about a lagoon that's full of feces and hog waste. And and it's sitting out in the open environment in a lagoon this lagoon I'm talking about is about the size of a football field, and it's sitting out in the open air. There are no tops on them. So and then they have the hog houses where they keep the animals inside these confined buildings from birth to death, and they're on cement floors. Their feet never touch the ground, and they're kept there until they are taken, from the time they're born till they're taken to market. Um, and the they have a piping system that runs from the hog house out to those open air lagoons. And so whatever those animals do inside those houses is falling through some slats in the floor and flushed out from those pipes, through those pipes flushed out from the hog house out to that open air lagoon. And let me tell you, if you ever wanna um deny that or claim that people are lying when they talk about how bad these things stink, just take your ride down I-40 and you can drive down I-40 east with your eyes closed and you know exactly when you hit Sampson at Sampson County and then Duplin because the air changes in your vehicle right away. It is so much stench in the air there until you can just smell it as soon as you hit those counties. And then you ride through the county and you can see the hog houses. Sometimes you can see the lagoons from the highway and you can see the spraying going on. Cause and so as I stated, it was the lagoon spray field system. The lagoon is what I just described. The spray field is when they take this waste, once the lagoons are filling up, they have to empty them out in order to prevent them from overflowing. And so they spray this waste out on the crops around the community using industrialized irrigators. And so they are literally spraying this animal waste through the air in these communities. And if there's any wind blowing, it carries that waste wherever it wants to carry it. And so it could go 5 miles if a good wind is going. But at any rate, once they start spraying, it is just an ungodly smell. You really wouldn't want to be nowhere near the area. And so people are actually living right next door to these operations. And the industry had at one point told the state that the waste did not leave the site that it was produced on. And, so I was like, and our legislators listen, I was like, how dumb can you be? Anybody that know anything about air and water already know there's absolutely no way you're going to control air and water. It's going to go in whatever direction it chooses to go. And so for you to say you can control it and it never leaves the site. So then they had some researchers that come down, not they as the industry, but the community had some researchers to come down from John Hopkins University a couple of years ago, and they did a study called the Pig Tubac study. And in that Pig Tubac study, they took the Q-tip swabs, like if anybody had the COVID test and swabs they was using to do the COVID test, where they took the Q-tip swabs like that and they swabbed the outside walls of people's homes and the outer sides under the air conditioning unit sitting in the window and just swabbed those areas. Then they took some Q-tip swabs and they went inside people's homes and they swabbed the top of their refrigerators, their microwaves, cabinet tops, tabletops, children's toys, and the walls, and they found animal waste. So if it's not leaving the site that it's produced on, how is it getting on my homes on the inside and outside of my home? And so these are the kinds of lies that our community members have had to live with, from this industry and up against a government who listens to whatever the industry tells them, and they pass laws to protect this industry, and people are barely able to live. They can't go outside when they want to. They feel like I've had so many people tell me, Naeem, I feel like I'm negotiating with the air. I have to open my door just a little bit to see whether or not it's stinking outside. If it's not stinking, then I rush out to do what I have to do so I can get back in before the odor comes, because when the odor comes, you do not want to be outside. And then, people don't use their clotheslines anymore. So they do their laundry and they have to either buy a wash and dry or they go to a laundromat versus just washing your clothes, stepping out your back door, hanging them on the line, at very low cost to people. But now people are having to invest in laundromats or washer and dryers, which is, again, these are tier one counties. People are on fixed income and these sorts of things. And so you don't always have it in your budget when you used to being able to just freely do what you do. You don't have it in your budget to start taking on these kinds of things, as well as people have been forced off their wells. A lot of these operations are in communities where people were on well water, and they've been forced off of their wells because they don't trust the wells anymore because they started seeing changes in the well. People have shown me their water, and you see it looks like murky and muddy and like dirt and grit and stuff is in it, and and it smells, and it smells like rotten eggs and stuff like that. And so people are afraid to drink their water, and then they having to purchase enough water to do what they have to do. I know I saw one lady. I was at her house. She had gotten this certified letter from the Department of Water Quality at Wilmington, where she had gotten her water tested because she saw an article in the paper that said you could get your water tested for free. So she called them. They came out and they took water from the inside of her home. They took water from her well outside, and they took it back. And about 2 weeks later, she got a certified letter telling her not to drink her water, not to cook with it, not to wash clothes with it, and if she had any animals, don't let them drink the water. And she did have puppies, a dog and some puppies, and they all died within a few months of each other. And these are the kinds of things that people are having to live with. And then in let's see, this is 2021, so I believe maybe, let's say maybe around 2014, 2015, there was 500 people that got together from Eastern North Carolina to file a class action lawsuit against Smithfield, who's the owner of the pigs in North Carolina. They filed a class action lawsuit, which you might have heard some of. It was in the news, called the hog nuisance lawsuit in North Carolina. And under this hog nuisance lawsuit, they were able to file this lawsuit because of the nuances that they've suffered, the health impacts that they've experienced, and the quality of life, and the devaluing of their property, all of these things that we have been hearing people tell us over and over and over. I can't breathe, my eyes run, my nose burn, I cough a lot, I get nauseated, I get headaches. They people were just pretty stressed out. And and it was all of these reasons that were named in the nuisance lawsuit. And as the cases went forward, they broke the 500 people up into 26 groups, and the first five groups got heard in federal court. And out of those first five groups, each group won their trial. They were jury trials, and each group won their trials and was awarded lump sums of money. And as a matter of fact, they were awarded 5 million in punitive damages, and 70, well, I believe it was 75,000 in let's see, it was punitive damages, and I can't even, my mind going blank on the other one. Compensatory, that's what. So 75,000 compensatory and 5 million punitive damages. And the courts later, after the fifth trial, the court said that the punitive damages could not be that large because, according to a law on the book in North Carolina, the punitive damages could not be more than 3 times the compensatory damages. And so it's just, that's been a battle. And the lawyers, of course, was appealing everything. But the people have been fighting for years against this industry and the damages that it's been wreaking on the communities and their well life, their right to enjoy their property, their right to clean air and clean water, their right to just be able to live. And I've been going in these communities for ooh, nearly 3 decades now, and you don't see the children outside playing. And people that live in rural America, they live there because they like the outdoors. Most times, that's why they live there. They love the outdoors, but you don't see people being able to hang outside because of all the, dirty industry going. You got the hogs, and then you got the wood pellets, you got the landfills, you name it, and it's there. The coal ash, now we got this new thing with this Gen X, with this PFAS and stuff in the waters, killing everybody down in the Cape Fear River Basin. And as a matter of fact, I think I've even seen in some places where they talked about this stuff has been going as far as Chatham County. So I always say to people, you know, environmental injustice is everybody's problem. It is not just Eastern North Carolina problem, it's everybody's problem. And the reason it's everybody's problem because, we sometimes, we can think we safe, like everybody might have when we first started hearing about COVID, nobody was worried because nobody felt like they would be harmed by it. And then all of a sudden, we got this massive problem that's affecting everybody. And, so environmental justice is like COVID. You can keep quiet if you want to. Next thing you know, it's going to be up on your doorstep as well. And if you're a consumer, you're affected because you're eating this meat that's being ill raised. They feed these animals hormones and antibiotics on a regular basis, on a daily basis, to promote growth. So if you eating that meat, you consuming those products. And then we look at our children, wonder why they getting so big. These young girls with breasts bigger than, full grown women and stuff, and just children being so large. And the reason being, excuse me a minute. Sorry about that. But anyway, so now children are being oversized and growing up and developing much faster than they should. And that's, again, because, if hormones and antibiotics promoting growth in the animals, then it's certainly going to promote it in humans as well. And we know that when we hear about steroids and stuff, how that can cause people to bulk up, where hormones and stuff do the same kind of thing. But at any rate, it takes all of us, to address these things to try to prevent some of this stuff from happening. So the hog nuisance lawsuit was one legal way that the communities had for trying to fight back against an industry that was really destroying people's lives. And the second way that um, communities were able to fight back, as you mentioned in coming on to the screen, a man and them talked about the Title Six. Well, Title Six is a tool that communities can use to file a complaint against any government agency that they feel have done egregious things to them, that's caused their lives to be really changed and impacted in a way that they shouldn't be. And so we filed a Title Six complaint. We being the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, representing all the communities that we work with, and the Waterkeeper Alliance, who are the gatekeepers to our rivers and streams and waterways in North Carolina, who's done an excellent job documenting the effects of these dirty industries on our waterways in North Carolina. And then the Rural Empowerment Association for Community Health, known as REACH, out of Duplin County, which is an organized community in Duplin County that's been working together to address the environmental problems that they're having in Duplin County. Three organizations came together representing all the communities we serve and filed a Title VI complaint against the Department of Environmental Quality. At the time when we first filed it, it was called the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and they later changed the name to Department of Environmental Quality. But we filed the complaint, uh, and we were able to show in our complaint all of the issues that I've already named as the reason we needed to file this complaint to represent the communities that were suffering. And we had 100 declarations. Those were statements from citizens in Eastern North Carolina that was being impacted by this industry. So we had them to give a declaration, and we recorded it and then added it to the complaint going into. The complaint was filed with the environmental protection agencies at the federal level. And and we were able to do that because under Title VI, no a government should not be able to do business in a way that has a disproportionate impact on low income communities of color. And we were able to show in whether it's intentional or unintentional on their behalf. They let's say they could say, well, we didn't know. Well, you might not have known, but that's your fault. You didn't know, because whether you meant to do it or not, it's done and it's damaged and it's a Title VI violation if you receive federal funding. And the Department of Environmental Quality does receive federal funding, so that made them eligible for us to be to file that complaint against them. And so that's what we did. And we were able to show that, it was through their permitting process for this pork industry, for all these pigs in North Carolina, that they were not taking into consideration cumulative impacts on people living nearby. They were not taking any Title VI considerations into, consideration. There were a number of things that they could have done different. They did not do, and as a result, it made them, vulnerable to the Title VI complaint that we filed, and so we did that. And out of that complaint, we wound up going into mediation with DEQ and reached a settlement agreement, which we could all, agree to and say, okay, so if you do A, B, C, and D, then we can, we think that would be for the benefit of the communities. And if you do those things, then, we can all live together. So, at any rate, where are we, Rachel? Amanda, do I need to stop and give us time?
We are absolutely going to continue this conversation, but we want to give folks a chance to write their questions in the chat, and then we'll just take a short break and come back, and we can keep going with the conversation and maybe answer some folks' questions that they have. If that sounds good to everybody. All right.
Yes.
So we'll be back in about let's see, maybe we'll do just a 5 to 7 minute break. So we'll be back at about 2:15. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Okay. All right. We'll see you in just a few.
All right.
Yes, thank you all so much. Just make sure to put your questions in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A with Belinda and Naeema after the break. Thank you all so much.
All right, everyone. So that is the end of our break. Let's all come on back, please. All right. So just to get this started, my name is Christine Diaz. I'm an environmental justice researcher and organizer with Clean Water for North Carolina. And as a refresher, so this question and answer session will be approximately 30 minutes. And thank you all for these wonderful questions in the chat. We will try to get to all of them, but no promises there. And so for our phone callers for this Zoom meeting, approximately 15 minutes into this session, you will be able to raise your hand, or you should raise your hand. And that's by pressing *9, and then we'll allow you to unmute yourselves. But we definitely have a lot to get started on. So first of all, thank you again to Belinda and Naeema for speaking about all of your experiences. I know it was really great to hear everything and all the truth telling from both of y'all. So one of the first questions that came up in the chat was, and feel free for either of you to take this question on. If Title VI is meant to prevent discrimination based on race, how is it that BIPOC communities often receive the brunt of pollution? Is it failure of enforcement? Is it bribes? What have y'all seen?
Okay, so this is Naeema, and we believe that it's both of what you named, it's all of what you named. It's a failure of enforcement at the local, state, and federal levels on these corporations. And again, we call it environmental racism, which means these things are not haphazardly happening or by chance happening, but we believe that they happen because they perceive people to not have the economic and political power to fight off these dirty industries. And of course, we've seen over the years that our elected officials do not give a darn about the people they represent. They are beholden to corporations, and we see it every day in the laws that they pass, where whenever communities stand up against these corporations, we've seen our state legislators pass laws to prevent people from being able to speak out or speak up and fight back. In the case of the hog nuisance lawsuit that I mentioned earlier, when those lawsuits were going forth, our state legislators, prompted by Smithfield, passed a bill called House Bill 467. On the House Bill 467, it stated it was the intent of that bill was to prevent communities from being able to file lawsuits against industries, whether they were industrial or forestry. Is what they specifically named. If you lived in an area where industrial agriculture was taking place or forestry work was going forward, such as the cutting down of all the trees around us for this wood pellet industry, that if you lived in those communities, you had no claim or no right to file a lawsuit against these industries, stating that these industries, were doing the business that they do, and people moved in on them, not them moving in on the people. And so they're saying that you should have known when you moved here that these kinds of things would take place. That is absolutely not the truth, because the majority of people living in these areas were already there when these industries came along. Um, People were living in these counties long before Smithfield came to town in the 1980s, was when they started coming into North Carolina, where people were already living in these communities. These are people living in these communities are living on a lot of them are living on generational property, meaning that that property was owned and lived on by them long before these industries were ever thought of. For example, we had one young lady, and most of you all may have met her, heard her talk, or speak about her community. And that was Elsie Herring in Wallace, North Carolina, which is in Duplin County, and she lived on her family's property that had been in their family for over 100 years. Her grandfather purchased that property as a free slaveman and distributed the property amongst her family. And the pork industry came in. Not only did they move in on them, but they took some of her land, and they went to the register of deeds office and they changed the map and deed to her grandfather's property. And once they changed it at the courthouse, then they went out to the property and physically took the land. And she died fighting back, fighting to get her family's property cleared out of that situation. And so these are, again, generational property that these things are locating themselves on. We know that when we look at the wood pellet industry and we look at Robeson County, people were living there long before the wood pellet industry came along. But that made no difference to these corporations. They just went in and set up shop. Northampton County, the same way. Every county you name, people were already there when these industries came along. And so it is not by haphazard, um, meaning that these industries are there, but these communities were targeted because they perceive people not to have the economic or political power to fight them off. And our legislators have proven that. Like I was saying, House Bill 467 stated that people living in these communities had no right to file a lawsuit against these industries under the claim that these industries were there first. Um, and that, so given that they had no right to be filing these lawsuits, they should have known when they moved there that this was going to happen. Um, and we know that to be a lie, an outright lie. Um, And so again, as Belinda stated earlier, just understanding what our rights are, knowing what your rights are, and not being afraid to fight for those rights, can make a difference. It don't always make a difference, but it can make a difference. And then so under 467, they were trying to stop these lawsuits from going forward. And they also, not only did they pass this bill to try to prevent people from being able to sue these industries, but they're saying if you sue, you can only sue for property value, and you can't sue for all the other nuances that is created for you, like a change in your way of life, your denial of clean air, clean water, the effects that it's had on your health, all these things that you have experienced from this shouldn't make a difference. That these industries should be able to do what they're doing without people interfering. And they also tried to do a retroactive clause, which made it very obvious that they only filed this lawsuit to try to protect the pork industry when they said under for the retroactive clause they want them to include the current nuisance lawsuits that were already going forward, that we need to stop these lawsuits from going forward, and the way to do that is to include them in this passing of this bill, that not only can you file any new lawsuits, but the old ones that you're already filing can be null and void if we can get it included in this passing of this law. Well, they were defeated in that we didn't defeat the bill, but we defeated the retroactive clause, which was a big victory for the communities. And so this was in 2016 that they filed House Bill 467. And then, as if that wasn't good enough, in 2017, they came back and filed Senate Bill 711. Under Senate Bill 711, it stated very clearly that that communities could not file lawsuits, that the people could not file lawsuits against the pork industry at all for any reason. And that bill got passed as well. And it was very clear that these two bills were only meant to protect the corporations and had nothing to do with the people that lived in these communities being harmed. And these were representatives that represent the people living in these communities that were only sitting in the seats that they were sitting in because the people in these communities voted them into office. And so that was just it was just, I don't know what to call it. It was just, I get mind boggled every time I talk about it. And not only mind boggled, I get pissed off too. And again, it just shows us that we need to clean out that state house because they have no interest of the people at heart. And Belinda, do you want to add anything? I'll be quiet for a minute because I could go on and on.
No, we'll go on to the next question, Christine.
Okay, that's fine. Well, sort of related, obviously you were just talking about hog and how the hog industry is really protected. But in terms of other sort of environmental justice struggles and polluting industries, are there any efforts to expand Title VI to include low-income communities or a rural status of a community instead of just the, I think, race, color, national origin that Veronica mentioned in the introduction?
You said, is there any to include low income communities?
Yes. Like, is there any efforts to expand Title VI to include those different classes instead of just what exists right now?
Well, I haven't heard of any, but that's just me. If anybody on this, because we have Will Hendricks, who might could speak to that, Sherry White as well. But to my knowledge, there's not been any moves to that means, and I'm not sure that there would be, given the nature of Title VI, which is, at the current time, specifically saying to protect communities, low-income communities of color, which has been throughout the history of environmental injustice, all throughout this country. All the communities that we talk about look the same. When we start talking about dumping on people, the communities look the same all around this country. Well, when we if we think back on this incident with Tennessee when they had the large coal ash spill, they cleaned it up, and what did they do with it? They took it to Alabama and they dumped it on these black communities there. And it's like whenever we talk about environmental injustice, if you really look at the pictures and show the faces of the people being affected, it is made predominantly people of color. There are low income white communities that suffer these issues, but I can tell you from experience, and most of us on here, if we acknowledge it, will can see that low income white people always vote against their interests. That's the result of white privilege. White privilege says that just because of the color of my skin, I deserve certain kinds of actions and protections and behaviors. And you have low income people that really buy into that, which really believe just because my skin is white, I don't suffer the same as them poor little black people over there. And you will hear those kinds of statements if we want to be honest about it. And so we've tried to include low income white communities. They don't always respond, or they feel like well, it doesn't affect me the same way. You will hear those kinds of statements. It doesn't affect me the same way, or that's my friend, or that's my cousin, or there's some connection that they feel to a kindred spirit to these people, different from what people of color feel about these dirty industries doing the dumping that they do. And so until we can get, you know, these low income white communities to understand that these people don't give a darn any more about them than they do the people of color. And, then that's a battle that we still have to fight. And if anybody else want to add something to that, please do. That's the way I see it, okay? And that's been my experience over the years. Another example of that is in this hog fight. Um, I've gone into white communities and talked with people, sat down in their homes with them, interviewed them, and um, listen to them talk about how they feel, what is the impact of them on them from this industry, and they have named the same things that black people I talk with have named, Latinx people have named, and the indigenous population have named, but then they'll say, "But those are my friends. We went to school together. We grew up together. We ate at the same table together. We did A, B, C, and D together." And so they feel like for those reasons, they shouldn't be complaining or saying anything against them. And they also, I had one lady who was a state representative, Sydney Watson, who was our a state representative for Duplin County back in the early 90s when she went up against the industry trying to represent the people that had put her into office, going with them to health board meetings, attending meetings where they were speaking out against this industry. The industry went after her, and they spent $2 million to get her unseated and she wound up losing the next election. And in 1994, she was voted out as a state representative because the industry spent all this money to get rid of her because she was addressing their behavior along with the citizens that she represented. And I interviewed her, and she talked about how the industry treated her, how they was showing up in front of her home, walking across her yard with sticks and guns, trying to intimidate her. And she nearly had a nervous breakdown from the way they treated her. And she was saying how these were people that she knew, people that she had grown up with, that she had even worked in the state house with, and she did not expect that kind of behavior from them. So we're talking about some vicious people when we talk about these corporations that they would stop at nothing to protect their ways and to be able to do what they do. Um, and there are stories out there where people can vouch for what I'm saying. And it's nothing that I'm making up. These are things that I've heard out of the mouths of the people that suffer. Had another man I talked with. He was a white man living in Dupin County, and he was living out on this massive land base. And he said one day he walked outside, he started seeing the hog houses coming. Next thing he know, there were 21 hog houses right around where he lived, and he wrote letters to the industry, about what was happening and asking them not to do what they were doing, because he said he felt that because he knew them and that they had grown up together and he had went to school with them, did all these different things, that he could talk to them. Well, when he began to complain, they did not waste time harassing him and threatening him. And that's been the behavior of the industry. I remember when I first started working on this hall problem and listening to the stories, I was thinking to myself, they sound like the mafia. The way the mafia treated people, well, that's the way the pork industry was treating people. And so they stop at nothing to protect their behavior.
Thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm gonna sort of move on to a sort of wrap up question. But just for everyone who's asking about what they can do and all these resources, we will be sending out a wraparound message that includes a lot of different resources, including there is an upcoming NBIVA hearing for the Sampson facility for their first time Title V permit. You can attend that virtually. But all of those resources and that information will be coming to you all. But so with both of y'all, you've had so many experiences fighting and continuing to fight against these polluting industries and corporations that are interested in profit over people. And I think that in itself is really an environmental racism, environmental injustice, social injustice. Really, so I want to hear from both of you how you don't get discouraged from all of these fights and working for so long, having some mixed results.
Let me start by saying, sometimes you do get discouraged, but you can't give up. And I think about our forefathers, our parents, people that got out and fought for us. Had they not fought for us, we wouldn't be where we are. So, at point in time, you have to take that torch and carry it on. And right now, what I'm trying to do is talk to some younger people. I'm 68 and, I'm still fighting. I still have a lot of fight in me, but I would like to basically try to recruit people that care about the environment and care about their communities and not see people just come in and take over because they feel like they have that right to do that. So even with getting discouraged, it was like, and I'll use the pipeline for an example. Everybody was like, oh, you all can't fight the pipeline. They got too much money. You all can't do this. You all can't do that, But naysayers, you're going to have a lot of naysayers. And if you listen to what people say, a lot of stuff wouldn't get done because you're listening to this negativity of saying what you can't do. I've always been taught by my mom. She said, you know, say what you mean what you say. Stand for what you believe and don't let anybody tell you that you're wrong.
Mhm.
And so I try to instill that in my two girls is, you know, stand for what you believe. And if you're wrong, say you're wrong. But if you're right, don't let anybody tell you that you're not, and keep standing. And eventually, you know, just like with the pipeline, it took 6 years, you know, and nobody thought it could be done. But look what happened. So if we had, you know, even got discouraged and gave up, it wouldn't have happened. So even sometime when you get a little tired, you just kind of sit back and regroup and think things over, and that will give you that extra push to say, they're not going to stop me. I'm going to do what I need to do, you know, and that's how I've perseverance and to continue as the Lord give me the strength and the power to do so, is to do what I'm doing right now, is to keep fighting, keep standing, and not let anybody tell me that I can't do what I'm trying to do.
And I would agree with Belinda, you know, and every day as I'm working, I think about, well, you know, we have got to recruit some young people because most of us is out here are aging out in terms of how much longer we gonna be around to fight the battles that we've been fighting. You know, Belinda says she's 68. I turned 70 on my last birthday, but you know that has not stopped me from, you know, wanting to do the work that I do, to encourage people to take a stand, to make their voices heard, to, you know, address the issues and understand what's happening around them, understand how this stuff get to us by looking at what your local governments are doing. A lot of these things come into our communities because we have local governments that really don't have a clue what economic development really is. And I always say to people, if economic development is not taking on industry that's gonna leave everybody in your community sick, you know, that is not economic development. And so helping people to understand, you know, what they should pay attention to in terms of how stuff get to them, and being able to get in front of something instead of always being behind it, because it's easier to stop something than it is to change it. And so we have got to instill that message everywhere we go. It's easier to stop something than it is to change it. So we can prevent these things uh, from at the start out, then we wouldn't have these long battles to fight. And so, you know, hopefully one day soon we'll all get in front instead of always coming up in the back at the back end. And we'll be able to change some of these things if we can get in front of them.
All right, thank you so much, both of you. Oh, sorry, Belinda, did you have
No,
something?
I was just, I had the privilege earlier this year to speak to a group of students, Courtney Wood students from Gillian School of Global Health, Public Health at UNC Chapel Hill. And, you know, North Carolina always say that, you know, public input. And I'm looking at the states because I asked them to research states that allowed public input into their permitting process. And we have so many states that are doing that. And, you know, I look at North Carolina and I see why we are a dumping ground, because, you know, a lot of states now are not permitting things to come in, and they know that they can't go in there. So, okay, we can go to North Carolina. They don't have any laws. They don't, you know, let the impacted people have a voice in what's coming or the permitting process. And that's why we have what we have. And I'm like, Naeema, it is time to start at the State House and come on down to the local house, because until we do that, we're going to get the same thing. My pastor always said, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. And that's why we're getting what we're getting, because we have nobody in Raleigh that are, you know, standing up and fighting and saying, okay, just like not in my backyard is okay if it's not in their backyard, but then, you know, put it in mine. Because the majority of the people that I look at in Viva, look at up in Bethesda, Maryland, that office complex they have. I mean, it's mega. It looks like a luxury apartment building or some sky rise. You know, they're profiting, but they don't live here in Northampton County, and they're happy with the ships going overseas. And then the people over there, I was on a call last week with people from Iconia, British Columbia, the UK, London, where they're paying these subsidy taxes because it's added into their light bills and they have no other choice, but they're not profiting from it. So, like I said, again, profit over people. We need somebody that's going to stand up and stop selling us out for something that, we're not going to benefit from at all. And they talk about economic development, and that word needs to be put out of the dictionary altogether, because it's just a word, economic development, and that's how they soup the people up. When the pipeline was being or supposedly being built, we had the mayor of Gettysburg on TV doing a commercial. It's going to bring jobs. It's going to bring this. It's going to bring that. And when we would go out, I had a young lady that was coming from Chapel Hill. She was doing her thesis, and she was an art major. So she would come out and take pictures, and I would go with her to keep her from going by herself. And every truck, every vehicle you saw had out-of-state license on it. You didn't see North Carolina license plates. You saw out-of-town license plates. And then when Grisp came and did an article, and we were going out, Daniel, and we were going out taking pictures, and we were right there in Gettysburg, and it was some Mexican. They were working, and they were speaking Spanish, but they didn't realize that Daniel knew how to speak Spanish. And when he started communicating back with them, I felt bad for them because they actually froze. And the first thing they wanted to know was, this going to be on TV? Is this going to be in the paper? And he was like, no, we're just doing this for an article. And, I'm not going to take your pictures, but, this is what was going on. But yet instead they said economic development. They didn't walk up and down Highway 301 where the impacted community was and asked anybody, did they want a job on the pipeline? They were just there. So, that's how it happened. So that word economic development is a false hope. That's what they use to lure people in and think that they're going to bring all this job and all this money, and it's not going to happen. So I'm going to jump off in a minute or two. But thank you all for listening. I hope I said something that would help someone. If you have any questions, Christine, somebody would get them to me. And like I say, all the people that have been here and been to Northampton County and helped me in what I was doing, again, I appreciate you wholeheartedly. And any time that I can be of any service, please just holler. Y'all have a blessed weekend. And if the Lord said the same, we'll talk again.
All right. Thank you so much, Belinda.
Same to you, Belinda.
That was wonderful, everyone. Zoom applause. Yay. All right. I'm going to hand it over to Veronica.
Well, thank y'all so much. You have really given us a lot to think about. And I wanted to take a moment and really just, say yes. Public participation is where it's at. So thank you, Naeema. Thank you, Belinda, letting people know, hey, you have a voice in this, get involved. And I actually have a few points I wanted to touch on that I want to mention to y'all in some kind of wrap up, tying it all together here. So just a quick note, just this year, our legislature passed the allowance of the Farm Bill with Section 11. It allows for general permits of directed biogas from our CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. So that methane waste being produced there is now going to be allowed to be piped to electric generating facilities. And it's just going to make things so much worse. So we have quite a fight ahead of us. But so we are saying we have Title VI. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So if we're working within the framework, how are we going to prove that discrimination? And this is what I wanted to chat with you all about very quickly. There's three big kind of tools that have been used with intentional discrimination, and it's showing a sequence of events. So make sure you take notes, keep notes of everything that's happening in your community, because you will show as things are happening in a certain order. Well, first the project was going to be in this area, but then those people spoke up and suddenly there was a campaign contribution and now it's being in this neighborhood. Mm-hmm. That can help prove that intentional discrimination. Another one is statistics and comparative evidence. So using that sequence of events, you can start showing, okay, statistically, whenever this campaign contribution happens, that project moves. Or statistically, when a project is being permitted, we keep seeing over and over again, it's in our BIPOC communities, what's going on. And so having that comparative evidence that we pull together will help rein that in. And then the third one is showing a history of discrimination and exclusion, especially down here in the South and Jim Crow. We're seeing there's still impacts here today. So having that history of exclusion and discrimination helps to build on the facts that we're putting together through a sequence of events, statistics, and comparative evidence. I want to talk a bit about disparity discrimination, though, because that's the biggest one. It's really hard to find intent, right? It's usually, well, we didn't intend to, we were neutral in our decision, which is often the case, but there's still impacts on the ground that are disparate. So I want to make sure we're focusing on that causation and not the motive. And it's a 3-step process to prove this. The first step of disparity discrimination is establishing adverse and disparate impacts. And on our next slide, it'll show a little bit about what these are. So we would have to show as the community that we are actually disparately impacted and in an adverse way. So this neutral practice actually has an effect on the ground. And ways of showing this are, okay, there's different treatments. This neighborhood has pollution, this neighborhood doesn't, or differing levels of it. Then we have asthma, we have heart conditions, cancer rates, property values plummeting. These are all hard facts that we can present as part of showing that not only is it a different or disparate impact, but that it's adverse as well. So Naeema mentioned animal waste on surfaces in homes and the smells. Just keep in mind, we have a right to a peaceful enjoyment of our property. So how are we dealing with this with all the pollution? Well, those nuisance remedies were recently severely restricted in North Carolina, which was one of the only remedies available to us. So keep this in mind as we talk about some of our next steps, our next action items. So step 2 in this process of disparity discrimination, it passes the buck back to the acting agency. I'm just going to say agency, assuming it's the government acting, right? It's on them to show a substantial legitimate justification. So the agency must show that they have a reason for this practice. The usual reasons are zoning. So if it's zoned for industrial use, then they're going to approve industrial uses of that property. And guess what neighborhoods are often between the more affluent and the zoning? Well, if you have the affluent neighborhood and the zoning right next to each other, that's highly unlikely. Usually it's the buffer, and the buffer is us. It's our BIPOC communities. So that's another area where we're seeing some issues. So let's go on to step 3. Because when we go to step 3, it's on us to say, okay, fine, you have a substantial reason, zoning, right? Well, now it's on us to show that we have either an alternative practice that is equally effective and results in less disproportionate effects, or that the claimed legitimate practice is actually a pretext for discrimination. So a good alternative could be, yeah, let's have a renewable energy source instead. Let's not focus on having a coal ash power plant next to us. Let's have a solar farm. That's just one example for cleaner air. I know there's other issues involved and I'm oversimplifying, but that's just an example. Another one is the pretext. So we heard, Belinda was mentioning economic development. That's going to be a word or a phrase you hear often. That is a pretext. It's a dog whistle. You'll hear dog whistle terms often to show that a quote legitimate practice is actually a pretext for discrimination. Urban centers, high crime areas, the sticks, blight. These are all dog whistles. So when you're hearing an economic development board or any of your local or state government officials mentioning these, take a quick look at what that community is, and chances are it's going to be BIPOC. So something to keep in mind. If it's not BIPOC, it might be rural and low income. So instead of saying rural and low income, they often might say the sticks. So just something to keep in mind to have as a little red flag for yourself. So I want to touch on what you can do. So you're here to learn a little bit, and we would love to talk on and on about this. We can have a whole bunch more sessions about this to go into detail. But what can you do? Join us, volunteer, become a member, speak to your representatives. We are working with a number of communities and other organizations to make things move. So one is our environmental justice law and policy work. Excuse me. We included our contact information below each of these program areas, so you know who to contact for you to get involved as well here at Clean Water for North Carolina. But we're working with communities like the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, the North Carolina Conservation Network, among so many others. I can go off for really hours listing them all out. But we're working on proposed legislation here in North Carolina and hopefully federally as well, focusing on granting an opportunity for our state agencies to have the proper authority they need and the tools they need to have three main considerations. One is consideration of environmental justice impacts on or from the proposed actions. So proposed actions must consider the EJ impacts. There must be meaningful public participation that must weigh public concerns that are being raised and weighed. So it's not just the information being provided by the industry. And then also that will require denial of permits that disproportionately affect impacted BIPOC and low wealth communities. So that's the big EJ law and policy work we're focusing on. I also wanted to touch on our CAFOS and community science work. We're taking back that power into our communities by gathering the science ourselves. We're collecting the evidence, the data that's part of that Title VI framework. And we're also going to use it outside of that Title VI framework to really make things move. So we're looking at air and water quality data and really expanding the community involvement in this area. Language equity and water justice is another area that we've started, and we're expanding language equity across the board. So if you don't speak English, even though this event here today is in English, if you're not speaking English and you're not getting the permit materials in English, how are you meaningfully involved? Are you being unintentionally discriminated against because of your national origin? So those are all things to consider. We have our community tools project, as Belinda mentioned. There are maps showing locations of BIPOC and low-income communities in relation to pollution, but these are often really convoluted and highly technical. So our community tools program helps to rein that in, and we help produce it in a way that makes sense to the average person who's not some technical scientist. And then the last one I wanted to mention, volunteer. So stay involved in your local government. Tell us about it so we can help amplify your cause. When we help amplify your cause, it will go to the state and federal levels, which is where we tend to work, but we want to work with you on your community issues as well. So just want to quickly mention all of those before handing it over to Rachel for some quick notes before we wrap up and then start our virtual tour here at 3 o'clock in 4 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is an absolutely beautiful Saturday, so I really appreciate y'all's time, and especially Naeema and Belinda. It was just an amazing experience to hear them talk about all their past work on environmental justice. And we know from Belinda's talk and Naeema's talk that they are a testimony to community organizing and working for power for the people, by the people, right? So that being said, you see it on your screen right here, but let's put what we learned into action. Everything that I will be mentioning can also be found on our website calendar at CWFNC.org. And we will also be sending a wraparound email to you all with some post-meeting resources, including a feedback survey that we'd love to hear from you about. So there's a couple EPA national engagement calls coming up, and you see that there on your screen, September 28th and the 12th. Those links to register will be found on our website and in your post-meeting materials. And we've already heard a little bit about this, but Enviva Sampson is up for their first time Title V air permit. So there will be a hearing on October 19th, starting at 6 p.m. Clean Water for North Carolina will be providing some talking points for grassroots folks who want to give comment, but Dogwood Alliance is also a wonderful resource for everything wood pellets in North Carolina. And I did skip going back to October 12th. We are finally having this special meeting by the North Carolina Environmental Justice and Equity Advisory Board to talk about biogas. We've been asking for this meeting for so long. So thank you so much to Sherry and Will and Naeema and Amanda and everyone else who was a power behind getting this meeting scheduled. We already talked about this a little bit, but Shelby, if you want to go to the next slide, please reach out to us and volunteer with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to even just connect with you on the phone or email. So that would be awesome. If you'd like to contribute to our work, consider becoming a member. Any donation would automatically make you a member of Clean Water for North Carolina. If you want to donate to other organizations that we partner with as well, you can find all their information on our website. We definitely want to highlight the Environmental Justice Network, where Naeema is a co-director, and just make sure that we do plug them there.